Welcome to this episode of the Complete Curiosity Podcast. I'm Ralph Behnke, and as usual, I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Watkins. Today, we're discussing the captivating topic of innovation, creativity, and ideation. Basically, the very essence of quality thinking. In this episode, we unpack the need to innovate innovation because pretty much anyone who's looked at this topic seriously has concluded that the way we innovate isn't working. For example, the UK currently wastes 65 billion a year on failed product launches. In this episode, we'll be discussing what innovation is, when to do it, why to do it, and how to do it successfully. We'll explain why most organizations fail to innovate, who needs to be involved, how to effectively harness the best quality thinkers in your organization, and how to save a massive amount of time and money while you achieve more with less. And finally, accelerate your growth. We'll clarify the difference between concept, context, and construct awareness. We'll suggest what you call a room full of experts and how to cross the triple chasm to reach all your customers. Our goal is to stimulate your curiosity and make you think about your thinking. Feel free to reach out to us if you're interested, or just start exploring these fascinating questions for yourself. So, buckle up, put your thinking caps on, and get ready to experience the power of your own mind in this episode of Innovation Sucks. It's a bit of a funny title, but you can read all about it in the book with the same name, or just listen to this episode. Hi, Alan. How are you?
I'm good, Ralph. How are you?
I'm very well. I have a question for you.
Oh, okay. Let's get
Have you ever come across the term, the opposite of innovation? Exnovation.
Oh, I haven't heard that. Oh, I love a new term. Go on, explain it to me.
Well, it's just simply that. It's the opposite of innovation. And I think it's
I thought that was stupidity.
Isn't it indifference? Or maybe that's the opposite of love. But it made me think, it made me wonder, in a world of relentless innovation, where do good ideas come from? And I thought that would be something interesting for us to talk about today, especially given you've written a book about innovation.
Yeah, Innovation Sucks, available on Amazon. But Innovation Sucks, and I quite like the title because in the UK at least 65 billion pounds wasted every year on failed product launches and innovation schemes. And the UK is not alone. Globally, the data is terrible. I mean, so pretty much everywhere people fail. I mean, we really suck at innovation. And the second reason I called the book Innovation Sucks is because if you do it properly, it actually sucks. Which means it's not innovation done well isn't companies pushing something towards a waiting market. The market sucks it. So we can unpack that. But I think there's a sort of almost a pre-step, which is the whole notion of quality thinking. And it's a subject very close to my heart. And I lean that literally and metaphorically. And we can unpack that piece because quality thinking obviously determines your ability to solve whatever problem you're facing in life. So if you can't conceive of it, if you can't think of it, then you can't solve the problem. And if I may, just one story. I was invited to sort of speak at a conference a few years ago, and the conference was called Thinking the Unthinkable. So it was a quite lovely title for a conference, and I sat there with all of these chairmen and chief execs for most of the morning. And what they were actually talking about, Ralph, was not thinking the unthinkable. They were actually talking about doing the undoable. And so they were arguing about, what needs to be done and is it doable? Is it achievable? So it was basically sort of, a debate about execution and delivery. And then, of course, they made the mistake of turning to me and asking for my opinion as the, neuroscientist in the room. And I said, very interesting, this conference is called Thinking the Unthinkable, but I'll tell you the one thing we're not thinking about, to which the host said, what's that? And I said, thinking. We're not thinking about thinking. We spent the whole morning talking about doing, We haven't even mentioned what thought is, where does it come from, where do good thoughts come from, particularly. And so, it's my observation working with leaders over the last 25 years, getting them to think about their thinking is itself quite an interesting challenge. Most of them think, some of them well, some of them not so well, but very few of them think about their thinking. So I think before we even get into innovation, it might be worth chatting for a bit about, thinking in and of itself.
So that process of thinking in the context of innovation, is that what you would label creativity or the creative process?
Well, creativity, is something new emerges. I mean, novelty is at the center of all of this, right? A new thought. And there's, of course, reams and reams being written about this, about new thinking. And the thing that I think is most interesting about that whole creativity and ideation, because ideation and innovation are not the same thing. So in the book, we just explain this, that innovation is the commercialization of a novel idea. Innovation is not coming up with a good idea. That's ideation. So if you don't make money from it, Ralph, you haven't innovated. Innovation, the commercialization of a novel idea. So lots of people come up with ideas. I mean, the UK as a society is very good at the ideation piece, but we're not very good at commercializing. I mean, the Americans, of course, the world champions at turning. They're less good at the ideation piece, but they're really, really good at the commercialization piece, as is Japan and other Asian countries, sort of copying and then commercializing. So we tend to be quite good at the ideation piece in the UK, but less good at the commercialization. So it's both. And neither of those. So creativity is more to do with ideation. Can I come up with a new and novel idea? So I think the most interesting thing about that is, and every human being, I mean, the human mind is incredibly creative. We come up with new ideas all the time, and we can dig into how that happens. But I often say to people, if you've ever had a good idea, where do you think that idea was 30 seconds before it emerged? Which is quite an interesting thought in and of itself. The idea suddenly emerged. I suddenly realized that I needed to do X, Y, and Z, or I had a sudden insight. Now, if you don't think about your thinking, and if you don't think about where ideas come from, then you're almost at the mercy of the weather. I'll just sit there and hopefully something will occur to me. And of course, people who have responsible for coming up with answers to problems, can't wait for creativity to strike them. They've got to get on with their job. So my dad, who, as you know, used to write comedy for television, on a Monday morning, would sit in front of 45 blank sheets of paper and would have to write a script and come up with ideas and be creative 9 o'clock Monday morning, every Monday morning, because he got 45 pages and he needed 3 jokes to every page for 45 pages. Now, if he sat there going, I'll wait for the creative impulse to strike me, he'd probably still be sitting there at Friday evening in front of 45 blank sheets of paper. So one has to become smart about and understand the nature of one's own creativity if you have to come up with ideas on demand. And even some very creative people don't know how they're doing it because they don't think about their own creative process. So, we can chat about how do creative people, because there are levels of creativity. Some people just, are quite creative, but they don't know how they're doing it. Other people have thought about it a bit more deeply and have started to figure out how they're doing it. So then it becomes a bit more replicatable, if that's a word, consistent, be able to do it consistently. And then, we get creativity on steroids, where ideation goes off the charts. So there are 3 levels, 4 levels if you include the inability to do any of it. So we can unpack that as a start point, if you will.
So let's just put that to the test, Alan, because obviously reflexivity, thinking about how you think about the things you think about, is an incredibly powerful process. And I would say that writing a book requires a reasonable amount of creativity and ideation. And this is something that you've done very well. You're a prolific writer. You're up to your 10th book now, I think. So, but what you've described in the past, and I'm kind of being a little bit provocative here, maybe. You've said, my creative process happens as a download. You'll wake up at 2 a.m. and you'll just start writing. So just tell us, how you think about that.
Yes, so that's kind of like at the advanced level. So let's see if I can run people through the basic levels first. So there's something, imagine you're, a pop song writer, Gary Barlow, whoever your favorite pop songer, Dua Lipa, whoever it is. And a lot of them run with a certain amount of anxiety. They write a hit song, but they're very worried about being a one-hit wonder. The first album went well off the back of maybe one or two tracks, but they worry that album number 2 will bomb. And they're particularly worried because they're not quite sure how they're doing it. So that's, if you like, called concept awareness. They have a concept, they have an idea around which they build the song. And if you look at some of the great songwriters over the years, Elton John and Bernie Taupin. Bernie would start with a poem, and Elton would start with a harmony or a lyrical or a musical hook. So they start with something. They've got a concept. It might be a bass riff, or a guitarist will just start going dum 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 dum, or something. So that's called concept awareness. The idea emerges. It's an emergent property in your kind of neural network, as it were. So you have an idea. Now, most creative people, that's what they're trading in. So when you're writing a book, you have an idea for a book. When you're writing a chapter in that book, you've got an idea for what chapter 1 is, what chapter 2 is. When you're writing chapter 1, you've got an idea of what the beginning of the chapter is and what the narrative arc is. And then when you're writing the beginning of the chapter, you've got an idea for how you might start, and you may even have an idea of what your starting story may be. So, it's kind of like fractal. Every one of these requires some ideas. So I've got an idea, I've got a concept. And then if you're really super smart, you might start to wonder, why is it that some days I've got loads of ideas and I'm very creative, and other days not so much? So people who then study their own creative process, and organizations do this as well, because of course organizations trade in ideas and quality of thinking. I mean, that's why the senior people allegedly are paid the big bucks, is the quality of their ideation, right? Their ability to solve commercial or customer issues. So you'll see them starting to go, okay, well, we think in this organization that actually if we change the working environment, if we have lemon-coloured walls rather than dark blue dull walls, it'll make people more creative. Let's have a grass-like carpet. Let's put a foosball table in and some cafe macchiato machines. So you'll see this, and if you go to sort of incubator hubs for a workshop, you'll see all the sort of crazy post-it rooms with lots of natural light, and what that is really starting to understand context awareness. So you move from concept awareness, which is I've got an idea, to realizing that all ideas occur in a context. So if you start to control the context, your number of ideas and the quality of your ideas might pick up. So in the music industry, very archetypally, when we're in the recording studio in Barbados with several lines of cocaine and a high degree of nudity, we can make great music. But when we're in the recording studio in Battersea, in the basement, not so much. And so people start to realize there's a context awareness in which the concept emerges. So control the context, and it might be, drug-fueled, mushroom-driven, or whatever it is, classically in some of the arts, or it might just be a beautiful room with a lovely view. This is, tuning into the context awareness. But where it really goes nuts is when you realize and understand how your mind creates novelty and you transcend context. And that's called construct awareness. You don't need the context. You don't need, the bright colored room with 1,000 post-its and the scribble walls and all of that craziness, and a slide between two floors where you play like children with big bean bags and all of that malarkey, which is very widespread in many, particularly in California. When you get to construct awareness, none of that's necessary. You can innovate or ideate just as well in a concrete basement as you can overlooking Lake Geneva. That's construct awareness.
So no to Barbados then, and we'll be stuck in a windowless room in Battersea.
Well, you might still want to go to Barbados, because after you've finished, your creative process, who wouldn't want to lie on the beach? But it's
Alan,
you're not dependent on it. That's my point, Ralph. You're not
well, and I think actually, what you're really describing is something that a lot of writers and artists would love to overcome. This idea of writer's block.
Yeah.
I think it's as you say, it does lead to a very anxious process for creativity, and certainly in the arts, what I'm aware of, and possibly even in corporate life, it seems that the motivator is often pain. And of course, people need personal reasons to write things, and so pain becomes a driver. But in the corporate sense, pain is often felt as a declining market, lacking in sales or profitability. So I just wanted to link this back to a previous conversation that we had about the capabilities, that are present in leadership. And there's these 5 capabilities that you've set out. And I wonder if we could just run through them. So there's things like strategy and operations, change.
Yeah, so the 5 capabilities, most companies recruit for technical ability. Can, Barry do the job? Can Alice do the job? Have they been trained in, have they got an accounting degree? So can we appoint them as a financial controller? Do they even understand? Can they add up? So that's technical ability. So often people are recruited for that. And of course, once you get them in, can they then run their area? That's operational capability. Strategic capabilities, can they grow their area? So can they either grow what the area is doing or expand into, as the world changes and evolves, can they grow with it or even get ahead? That's strategic capability. So that's all largely focused on doing stuff, technical, operational, strategic. Then you've got leadership capability and you've got change capability. So in terms of ideation, of course, you need ideas. You need good quality ideas in all of those areas. So if you're going to solve a technical problem, you have to be able to come up with an answer. Likewise, with operational, strategic, leadership and change, you need answers. So the quality of your mind and the way that it works is really fundamental to being better in any of those 5 areas of capability. And then when you get to these types of creativity, concept awareness, construct awareness, when you get to these types of abilities, concept awareness, context awareness, construct awareness, that's the evolution, if you like, of the creative process. At construct awareness, you don't have writer's block. In fact, you have the opposite problem, kind of writer's gush, if you will. So I've got too many ideas, and that's a different problem. And then you've got to be creative about how you understand your ideas and how you channel your ideas. And then to your original point is where are those ideas coming from? Are they coming from a download in the middle of the night? Are they coming from your colleagues? That's another whole thing that one can dig into. The source of the novelty. Where does it come from? So we can talk about that. But pain, you mentioned pain. Pain is a very interesting phenomenon in relation to the creative process, because classically, if you're in physical pain, it shuts down your creativity. It's very difficult to come up with novel ideas or innovative stuff if you're in physical pain. Generally speaking, pain has a sort of interesting sort of paradoxical relationship with creativity. If you haven't got a problem to solve, if life is very easy, you're in your comfort zone, there are no problems, and therefore there is no reason to problem solve. So it's not like a linear relationship between pain and discomfort and creativity. For that reason, you need a certain amount of pain or discomfort or ill ease, but if you have too much, it's inhibitory. So too little inhibitory, too much inhibitory, the right amount of discomfort causes you to try and solve the problem. So you'll classically see people who do extremely well in life often have come from very difficult circumstances. I was watching the biopic on Tina Turner last night, and she came from a very poor family in the Midwest, and then her well publicized marriage with Ike Turner, where he was very abusive to her, and through that pain she survived, but actually her creativity preceded that. She was just naturally creative, and it wasn't until she escaped from Ike's clutches then she suddenly had a whole surge in creativity, way beyond the level of creativity when she was in the painful relationship, abusive relationship she was in. So it's kind of like an inverted shape U, the relationship between pain and creativity.
Yeah, I like this idea of context awareness, concept awareness, construct awareness. You can see people that are construct aware because, as you say, they just can't stop, and they have an enormous amount of ideation, but also innovation. So actually turning that into value. So it sounds like, if I just kind of think about, organizational innovation, this idea of create a crisis. It's the moment we have to change. We are. You have to create the burning platform. And then, of course, it seems like the degree of which there is a shared view on the context awareness, the concept awareness, and the construct awareness, is potentially related to how fast you then actually are able to bring an innovation to market. What's your view on how that comes together
That's a super complex, the speed with which you can move. So coming up with the ideas is really dependent on your level of maturity. So if you're concept aware, you might have a creative day, you might not do, but you don't know how you're doing it, so you can't change the circumstances to make sure you optimize and become creative every day. So it might take you 5 days, for example, to come up with an idea. When you're context aware, you go, okay, well, I'm going to go outside, get a bit of fresh air. I'm going to clear my mind. I'm going to do things. I'm going to change my context. And therefore, that occurs to you to do that on Wednesday, because on Monday and Tuesday, you've come up with nothing. So you're going to change the context, and therefore, you'll be faster than the person who was sitting there and eventually an idea occurred to them on the Friday. But when you're construct aware, it occurs to you about 10 minutes in. On Monday morning. So the speed, so those are developmental levels: concept, context, construct. So what's really driving the speed is development. How sophisticated is your mind? So if organizations want to move faster, the game changer always is the sophistication of the individuals. But then let's imagine you've got a few construct aware individuals and you put them at the heart of the innovation process. Then getting that novel idea to market, that is a super complex process that doesn't just depend on ideation and creativity. It depends on personal relationships and power battles and culture and all sorts of other, and team effectiveness and all sorts of other complex things which we go into in the book. So one of the things that we wrote about was the reason why most organizations that suck at innovation is because they're using an outdated model. So most of the ways that organizations and indeed society approach a problem is they turn to the experts. And we saw this in pretty much every government in the world through COVID. Let's turn to the experts. We're guided by the experts. And of course, the experts they turned to were often, some of my former colleagues, medical experts. And certainly in the UK, we turned to the chief medical officer. And usually in most countries, the chief medical officer is an epidemiologist. So what epidemiologists care about is the death rate in society. So the whole policy in most nation states became about, reducing the death rate in society. Largely because the expert that was advising them, that's the primary thing that they care about, which sounds pretty reasonable. And then the moment in time came where people started to realize that, the lockdowns that were happening and keeping people in their rooms, yes, it might keep the death rate down, but it caused other unintended problems like mental health issues, social anxiety issues, access to care for people with non-COVID rated, those people were dying. And there were economic problems, and the economic problems, might cause even more damage and suffering than the COVID itself. But of course, that never occurred to the epidemiologist because what they are experts on is the death rate in society. They're not economists. That wouldn't even occur to them. So we're guided by the experts, but who are these experts we're relying on? So when we wrote the Innovation Sucks book, we were thinking about this and going, okay, if you get a room full of experts together, what's the collective noun for a room full of experts? And I often ask people that. You get some very interesting, a stupidity of experts, stuff like that. And we decided to call, there wasn't a collective noun, there isn't a well-known collective noun for a room full of experts. So we offered one up, a meadow of experts. Do you like that, Ralph? A meadow of experts. Largely because you could think of an expert as this beautiful flower, but they're rooted to the spot. They might have a very deep tap root, but they know everything about a tiny little area. And innovation processes in companies and societies are often driven by experts. It's your classic sort of pharmaceutical R&D model, where you have a funnel with 9 stage gates that you've got to clear. So you put 20, 30 ideas in the top, you filter them, and of course it's a filter, not a funnel. It's described as the R&D funnel, but it really is a filter. And after 10 years and £25 million, eventually you get a single product that you launch and then it fails. And that's largely the process that most companies still to this day run. And when we're trying to solve a problem, we create various scenarios, we do scenario planning, we come up with hypotheses and we test those very research driven, and the research itself is driven by experts. And we said, no, that model fails. That's why we're wasting 65 billion a year. So rather than have a funnel where you put 50 ideas in the top and come out one at the bottom, why don't we flip the funnel? Rather than pushing each idea through that funnel, propelling them, why don't we have an impeller? So here's a new word, Ralph, impeller, which is the opposite of propeller. So an impeller means you flip the funnel, and rather than the organization pushing stuff through stage gates, is you flip the funnel and you get the market to suck. So hence innovation sucks if you do it properly. You get a pull from the market. So what is it you're pulling? You're pulling the answer. Well, how do you know what the answer is if you haven't done the research? And that's the killer question. How can you come up with the answer if you haven't done the research? And the answer to that question is you have to rely not on experts, because experts are flowers rooted to the spot. They've got deep knowledge in a tiny area. Just like the chief medical officer knows all about epidemiology, but he's not even aware of the economic consequences of the lockdown, which often might cause more suffering than the COVID itself. Didn't even occur to him, wasn't on his radar, and why would it be? So what you need to do to put at the heart of the innovation process is not an expert. What you need is the integrator. And in the metaphor of the meadow, this would be the honeybee. The honeybee that buzzes around the meadow, picking up insights, knowledge, and wisdom from the experts. So, and those honeybees usually have the answer already, or they have a 60 to 80% version of the answer. So, how do you have the answer if you haven't got the research? You turn to an integrator because the integrator's already got the answer. How have they already got the answer? Because they've already done the research. They've been buzzing around the meadow as a honeybee, picking up bits of knowledge and insight and wisdom. And so in every organization, there are three types of people. There are general managers, generalists who know a little bit about lots of things. That's a classic in the medical system. That would be a general practitioner. And then you've got the experts, which is what most of the system is populated with. So you've got, the cardiologist, the immunologist, the neurologist kind of thing. Or in business, you've got the finance expert, the head of marketing, the chief people officer. These are all experts. So most businesses have generalists and experts. But the third type, which we called out in the book, is you need integrators. So integrators are the honeybees that buzz around the meadow of experts. So if you put an integrator at the heart of the innovation process, it completely disrupts the whole thing and suddenly adds a massive amount of speed and a much higher probability of success. So we must stop relying on the experts. I mean, you'll still use the experts. You still need the bee to buzz around the meadow. I mean, they still have a role in the whole thing, but they're not at the heart of it. You put the honeybee at the heart of it. The honeybee creates the cone, the honeycomb, and that honeycomb is already created before you even ask the question most of the time. So when you do that, and there's a lot more besides that, but when you flip the funnel and put the honeybee at the heart, you save a huge amount of time and money, and you massively increase the probability of success.
So it really begs the question, how do we find the honeybee?
That is a great question. Well, of course, you can't find the honeybee if you don't even realize that you need a honeybee, right? And most honeybees, because most organizations recognize generalists and experts, their whole way of thinking doesn't even include a honeybee. And so you question, well, why is that? And it's largely because at school, we're trained with a two-legged stool. The two legs of the school stool are experts and generalists. So if you remember, in most educational systems around the world, we have a general teacher that teaches you every subject up to the age of about 7. You have one teacher, so you go up and you see Mrs. Buggins or whatever her name is, and she teaches you everything. You have one teacher. And about the age of 7 or 8, suddenly that model flips to a maths teacher, an English teacher, a geography teacher. And certainly when you get to secondary school, you have a teacher for every subject. So these are expert teachers. And then you get micro-expert teachers. You get maths and advanced maths. I mean, you don't just... And then you go to university, same issue, right? You don't do engineering. You do chemical engineering, different teacher. Or mechanical engineering, different teacher again. So the whole of education and university is set up on general managers and expert teachers. And you go into business. So again, you have some general managers in business, but most of business, how you get to the top is by cultivating an expertise. So these systems, whether it's school, university, certainly science and medicine, privilege experts. So we've got the cult of the experts, and how to succeed is by becoming the best expert and trading in your expert knowledge. And so what we're saying, particularly with the rise of AI, because of course AI will hoover up a lot of this linear expertise and is already doing so. So actually it's these slightly rarer species in this meadow of a million flowers, two bees, or not to be. So the bee is what we need to look for. And in every organization, you have them. But because organizations don't understand the role of the integrator or honeybee, it forces them to be an expert. So you've got these people. I heard speaking to a client this week who said, "Oh yeah, we've got this person. He's currently doing project management." And then they described this person to me who was clearly an integrator, but he was forced to be a flower, you know. So it's like forcing the honeybee to be a flower. And of course, he was unsettled and rather sort of irritable, because he was having to do a dance and pretend to be something that he wasn't. It was constraint. And then often what happens in organizations, these weird people who don't fit the norm leave. They exit out. Making organizations' problem even worse is they kill the bees, or the bees buzz off. Whereas actually we should hunt these people down. First of all, recognize that they exist, try and find them, and they're the sort of weird people, who can turn their hands to many things. Who are they're not generalists. They're not a little bit good at everything. They're really good at several things. So another word for these people are polymaths, and of course Da Vinci was the poster child for polymathic capability. But if you're an expert, it looks baffling. How can somebody write a book about leadership, and then write a book about the future of the food industry, and then write a book about the future of politics, and then write a book about climate change? In a world of experts, that's considered impossible. But when you're a honeybee, it's entirely possible, because that's the way your mind works. You're polymathic.
Yeah, and obviously there is a degree of construct awareness that you can share across many systems. And I think that really also brings me to the question of value systems, because one of the models that you work with extensively is spiral dynamics and the values system. And in that system, you have tier 1 and tier 2. And it strikes me that it's the role of these innovative thinkers at the tier 2 level that are most commonly, at least concept, if not construct aware. And so I'm kind of holding an idea that, can we find them through values assessments? And then maybe a second idea, if I just might throw out in another assessment, in the network analysis, there is also this concept of the catalyst. So, the person that essentially connects the many and is a catalyst for ideas. I wonder if we could just talk about those two phenomena and understand their role in identifying.
Right. So the first one, the value systems, that's basically a measure of sophistication. It's just the sophistication of what? Not cooking skills, how sophisticated. It doesn't measure your cooking skills. It measures what motivates you, what you value. And so I often explain this by saying to people, let's imagine we write 100 words on 100 different Post-its or cards. And I ask you, Ralph, pick your 5 favorite words out of these 100 words. And then you pick results. But if you pick the word results, you also pick the word winning, and you pick the word achievement, and you pick the word goal. And you turn all those over and they're all orange. The color of the card is all orange. So these ideas cluster. If you pick the word precision, you also pick the word process. You pick the word principle, you pick the word diplomacy. Turn those cards over, they're all blue. So again, that's what these value systems are, or motivational systems. They're clusters of related ideas that hang together. And so there are 8 of these value systems in the world, but they're not, the critical thing here is they're not variations, they're evolutions. So one cluster is more or less sophisticated than another cluster. So as you move up into, of these 8, the last 2 are the second tier clusters, as you describe. They're at a level of sophistication, and the main difference between the first 6 value systems, which by the way is 98% of the planet. There's less than 2% of humanity have reached tier 2. But one of the things that happens when you do reach tier 2 is you start to see the usefulness of all the previous 6 levels. Now, when you're in the previous 6 levels, you tend to take an I'm right, you're wrong approach to life. My value system is correct and yours is wrong. So what I need to do, Ralph, is I just need to force you to capitulate to what I think is important. And if I can force you to capitulate to what I think is important, peace will descend. But you're trying to do the same to me. You're trying to force me to capitulate to your value system. So, of course, tensions arise. And these tensions might be between us as 2 colleagues or 2 departments in an organization or 2 nation states. At the core of those tensions, these are not personality clashes between you and I. I mean, it's a complete misunderstanding. They're actually values clashes or culture wars, if you prefer. Is we're operating from a different set of values. And we don't realize that. And, your values may be more or less sophisticated than mine. And by the way, when we say sophistication, we definitely do not mean better. A lot of people mistake sophistication as a proxy for better. And that's, again, a profound misunderstanding. I mean, a car is more sophisticated than a bicycle, but it's not better than a bicycle. If you want to get fit, you want the bicycle, not the car. If you want to go somewhere quickly, you want the car, not the bicycle. They're different. One is more sophisticated, but it's not better. And so that understanding, when you get into tier 2 in the yellow and turquoise value systems, your ability to comprehend the contribution of all the previous 6 value systems comes online. And that's a general principle of development, is that when you move up a level, new ideas, new phenomena come online that didn't exist and couldn't exist at the previous level. So taking that back to creativity and innovation, actually the one way to speed up creativity and innovation is to help people grow up and become more mature and more sophisticated. Because with each new level that you unlock, you get more speed, you get more energy, you get novel ideas. That's a general principle. But trying to get organizations to lean into that and say, look, actually, if you just invested, rather than taking all your executives onto a plane and dropping them in the jungles of Costa Rica and giving them some kind of wilderness experience and hoping that somehow that's going to make them more creative, that's just reflective. You have no idea how to build creativity. And how you build creativity is unlock new levels of development. And fortunately, these levels are very well defined in adults. Just like levels of child development, there are levels of adult development. Now, if you understand them, then you can help leaders in any walk of life unlock these new levels. And with each new level, better thinking, better ideation, better innovation, more energy, more speed.
And the role of the catalyst, Alan. So if we think about being able to identify those tier 2 people.
So if we look at identifying them in your organization, the people who are in the second tier from the values are more likely to be your honeybees. Not always, but more likely. And similarly, the catalysts in organizations. So when you look at, you ask your top 1,000 people, who do they turn to for stretching their thinking? So you get a list of who are the best innovators in your system. And then who are the people who connect different departments? So the connectors or the bridges are possibly not the innovators. What you're looking for is the people who stretch thinking. So we did a project with an organization in the Far East, and they offered us, they'd heard that we build leadership academies, and they wanted us to build their academy, and they offered us a lot of money, and I turned it down. So that sort of surprised them. They couldn't understand is they were offering to give us a big check, and I said, no, that would be the wrong thing to do. And they said, well, explain why you're turning our money down. And I said, well, I suspect you've got 5 different business lines, and what you're going to do is to pick 10 or 15 people from each of those business lines and put them on this academy course. They said, yeah, that's pretty much what we were planning. And I said, well, that gives us 100 people, but how do you know they are the best 100 people to put through a development process? And so we did some network analysis and we asked their top 1,000 people who they turned to. And we discovered that they didn't have 100, strategic thinkers. They only had 47. So when you look at the impact, there were 47 people who were pretty good strategic thinkers, and after that it dropped off a cliff. So I said, look, rather than put 100 people through this program, you should just put the 47, because beyond that, you're going to just pad the program out with people whose quality of thinking is not at the right level, and it's just going to dilute the effect. So we immediately halved the cost of the academy program for them, having done the assessment. So we identified through assessment who were the best people for the program, and then the program became 2 or 3 times more powerful and occurred at half the cost. So you can use these assessments of values and networks to really identify where are our honeybees, where are our integrators, and then how do we really work with them in a different way, put them at the heart of the innovation team to drive a growth in our commercial revenue.
So now that we've found our honeybees and we've identified our pain, there's obviously a process. We often call it the go-to-market process, and it strikes me that what we're talking about with innovation, and you mentioned flipping it, flipping the model. So when I think of technology, I think of lean innovation, minimal viable products, stuff that I can prototype, take to market quickly, get feedback, and incrementally improve. What do we know about the process of actually taking stuff to market and how we can organize ourselves to actually achieve success, given we've got so much failure?
Well, you need a different team. So you need an innovation team. So in the sort of first phase of the innovation team is led by the honeybee, right? Because they've already got the answer. So you might do a little bit of very fast, rapid prototyping and testing, getting across the prototype chasm, and then the commercial. Will this actually work in the market? So you sort of test it with early adopters. But when you want to go to scale, the main chasm, there are 3 chasms that you've got to cross. The main chasm is the scalability chasm. And when you want to cross the scalability chasm to get to the main market, which is where you make all your money, you actually don't want the team to be led by the integrator or the honeybee. You pass it over to an entrepreneur, who doesn't really care 2 hoots about what the answer is. They want to commercialize the answer. And so that's really where you clean up, is you've got to pass the baton from the bee to the salesperson or the entrepreneur, the commercialization person, who doesn't have an axe to grind. If you have the bee running it all the way through to the market, it's their baby, and they can't see it fail. So companies will often keep going with a product or a service way beyond when they should have killed it off, because the person they had was the person who conceived of it, who's then trying to commercialize it, and it's not the same person. It's a totally different skill set. So we unpack this in the book, like who needs to be in the innovation team and how do those roles and those people change as you go through, cross the 3 chasms to get to the main market, and then actually grow the company and make money. So it's understanding, the innovation team, having the courage to change the roles of the people and who leads the team at different points. And then there's, the funding of all of that. So when you go to the mass market, there's different funding models. So you've got to look at the business model. Do we need a special purpose vehicle set up that's independent of the main company until it starts to make enough money? And then do we bring it back into the main company, or do we divest it? Or all of these things need to be thought through, but not by the honeybee. The real value out of the honeybee is solving the complex problem that you started with at inception, but they're not necessarily the best, and very unusual for them to be the best person to commercialize the great answers you come up with.
So, Alan, if we think about companies that are doing this particularly well, I mean, it strikes me this is a really complex discipline for companies to even innovate as a concept and construct in their own innovation practices. So, but I don't know. It feels like those innovation mainstays, or the Google, Facebook. Are these the companies that are doing it well? Are there others that really stand out as really having a handle on this model?
No, I mean, we looked around and there are very few companies. They're doing it better than other. They're not doing what I'm describing. They're either making the R&D funnel, the stage gates, and they're getting through it faster than others, or they're, backing 1,000 flowers and one blooms and becomes something. They're not operating. Most of them are not operating the model, this sort of impeller model, or this flipped funnel model with the integrator or the polymath at the heart. Most of them are not doing that. And if they are, they're often doing it by accident. So the reason why innovation and the stats, I think Clay Christensen, who was the professor of innovation at Harvard, has some very telling stats on how bad America is. I mean, but it's not America or Britain; it's everywhere. Because we haven't innovated the innovation process, which is kind of ironic, right? We're still running a very old-fashioned industrial, production line type philosophy to the process of innovation, and so until we start understanding the nature of innovation itself and how to innovate innovation, even the best companies, the ones you call out, probably could go a lot faster, a lot better. So we saw recently, for example, from Apple, they brought out the Pro Vision VR goggles. That was their first new product in 8 years. Now, Apple's often held up as the number one innovating company in the world, right? They haven't produced a product for 8 years. So what does that tell you about Apple's innovation? Now, maybe that's because they've got to a size and scale that they're now largely in maintenance and they're making so much money that they don't need any new products, or the new products they do is the iPhone 14. That's not really innovation, that's evolution of an existing service or product. So once companies get to a big size, sometimes the size impairs their ability to innovate. So if you look at where are the real shining examples of innovation, you've often got to go to SME type scale. The small entrepreneurial startups who are coming up with a new. Big companies are particularly bad at this stuff. And the way that they do it is through acquisition. So you'll see these big tech companies hoover up all of the clever, innovative stuff going on more towards the bottom of the pyramid. And so they approach that through that mechanism. So some of these big tech companies have, innovation drives where they'll set a competition, £1 million reward for the best innovative thing. And what they're really looking to is get all the coders to submit their project and acquire the best one for themselves. Why? Because they can't do it themselves. So they're using this other mechanism of putting on a competition to find the best ones. It's like sort of X-factoring innovation out there. So that's how the big companies tend to do it. So the best innovations tend to occur, in much smaller companies. And also, to reinforce that way of approaching the problem, if you look at the history of medical innovation, which is particularly interesting, there's a great book by James Lefanu on this called The Rise and Fall of Modern Medicine. So he looks at all the great breakthroughs in modern medicine, and most of them either occurred by accident or came from some weirdo, usually a polymath integrator honeybee, working in his garage on his own outside the mainstream. So most of these disruptive leaps forward in any field come from mavericks outside the field. They don't come from the hallowed halls of learning. So that's a mythology. The hallowed halls of learning in medicine and science are like the big tech companies. They hoover up some weird weirdo's sort of idea that was going on in a garage or a bucket. So if you look around in these different fields of human endeavor, you often see that innovative impulse is not in the big companies and the hallowed halls of learning. So we should admit that, accept that, and start to look at what are these people doing that's different from the mainstream, the big tech, the hallowed halls. And that's kind of what we've done in the Innovation Sucks book, saying, look, there's a whole different way of thinking about this. And if we can understand that, we can all get a lot faster, smarter, quicker. And given the direction of the planet at the moment, Ralph, we're going to need to.
Yeah, I think there's a great imperative to improve the quality of thinking, and I just I'm left with this thought. If AI, and certainly we're on our way to potentially achieving a super intelligence, I think we can start to see the reality of that. But your point about the experts essentially becoming defunct in an age of AI. And I just wonder if that actually is, then ushers in the era of the integrator, because the expert is essentially defunct. So who has to take over? Well, it's the person that interacts with the AI, and that's going to be the integrator.
Right. Exactly. Sorry, Ralph, you were asking a question?
Well, I just that was just an observation. It kind of came to me as you were describing. So maybe the acceleration of man and machine is really the savior in terms of bringing innovation to market at scale.
Well, I think there are, and again, we wrote about this in the book, there are a number of threads that, will cause honeybees to, the number of honeybees to rise. One is millennials. As more millennials enter the workforce, there's a greater propensity for this maverick, disruptive way of thinking in the millennial population than in Gen X, Gen Y, and baby boomers. So that's a factor. The complexity of the world, old solutions just don't solve modern problems because the modern problems are so complicated. The old linear way of thinking and the old linear solutions don't work very well. So that's the thing. AI itself, is a thing. So as linear thinking and algorithmic thinking gets hoovered up by the AI, and that's already a sort of busted flush. I mean, the experiment's already been done that AI can diagnose faster and more accurately than any medical doctor. And so now the debate is about how do we use AI as an adjunct to medical practice, but there's quite a lot of medical practice being replaced. And there was one of the reasons ChatGPT got a lot of notoriety recently is in 4 months it trained itself to pass the bar exam. And it gave brilliant answers to these questions. Now, it doesn't really understand the answers it's giving, but it can pass the exam. So it's a mimicry of intelligence still. So there's still a way to go until it becomes intelligent in the way that we would understand intelligence. And there's a long way to go in terms of general intelligence as opposed to narrow intelligence. So the AI is still very brilliant and faster and quicker and smarter than human beings on narrow intelligence, but general intelligence is still quite a long way off. And a very long way off is integrative intelligence. Actually, if you want to protect your livelihood well into the future, it's starting to understand the ability to join the dots of multiple phenomena rather than being a deep diver in one area, because the deep dive in one area, AI can certainly hoover that up.
So, Alan, your advice then for a deep-rooted expert that is looking to flourish in the future, if you had to set out a roadmap for innovation, what would you do? What would the first steps be for an organization that is looking to leverage honeybees, create them potentially out of the meadow of experts, and really start driving innovation in a way that we've never seen before? What can they do?
Well, they can read the book as a start or come and talk to us, Ralph. But if they did neither of those two things, is just to start to think about their own innovation team, their own innovation process, and start to become curious about, is there a different way of doing this? I try and identify, well, who are our generalists, who are our experts, and who are our integrators? So as we talked about those assessments, you can start to pinpoint them. I mean, in complex systems, you still need all three roles. It's just the value of each role changes. The value of experts will continue to diminish because AI can deliver that. The value of the integrators will rise. And competitive advantage will be more driven by the integrators than by the experts. And so the companies that understand that first and start to be able to assess their talent pool in that way will get the leap. And that leap won't just be first mover advantage. Once they understand the nature of that and the nature of their honeybees and how honeybees have moved from concept to context construct awareness, have we got development programs that can actually mature our honeybees so they become super honeybees? It's all of this type of stuff that organizations can do. It's just applying the principle of sophisticated thinking to their own innovation team and their own innovation process. Lots of low-hanging fruit, lots of stuff that can be done to improve organizations' abilities to just outthink the competition. And so those that embrace that, will do better than those that don't.
Amazing. Well, as usual, we've covered a lot of ground. We've spoken about Gary Barlow, Dua Lipa, cocaine in Barbados. But Alan, actually, where I thought this conversation was going to leave me with a lack of hope, I now actually have a huge amount of hope. Innovation truly sucks, but it's a good thing. And I think everything you've described through the levels, the capabilities, this role of the integrator versus the expert, it's kind of really brought to life, the mechanism by which we can innovate, and actually very positive message. So thank you very much for enlightening us about why innovation sucks.
Well, it's always a pleasure chatting to you, Ralph, and lots more chats to have as we roll through these podcasts.
Thank you so much, Alan.